All right, let's get right into it. Today we're breaking down a really fascinating take on a pretty wild foreign policy move. We're going to unpack a Fox News broadcast that presented a controversial decision as, well, a stroke of strategic genius.
So the whole argument we're looking at today, it really hinges on this one pretty provocative phrase. This is how the broadcast framed Europe's reaction to the whole situation. So let's see how they build that case.
Okay, so where does this all kick off? Well, according to the source, it starts with this deep-seated feeling that the NATO deal is just fundamentally broken, that there's this financial imbalance that's been a problem for years.
And here's the number that really fuels the whole thing, a whopping 65%. The broadcast claims that the United States is footing the bill for 65% of NATO's total security costs. This is presented as the smoking gun, the proof that American taxpayers are getting a raw deal.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? It's all about the contrast. On one hand, you have the U.S. perspective from the source saying, hey, we're carrying an unfair burden. But on the other hand, the source points out that Europe's collective economy is just as big as the U.S.'s. So the question becomes, why can't they pay more for their own defense?
And this quote from then President Trump, it just perfectly sums up that frustration. The message is pretty clear. This isn't some new thing. It's a problem that's been around for a long time. And well, this administration decided it was time to shake things up.
So you got this decades-old alliance. How do you actually force a change? According to the source, you don't ask nicely. You make a big, bold, almost audacious move. And that's what came next. The offer to buy Greenland.
Now hold on, the broadcast is really clear on this point. This was not just some publicity stunt. The idea of buying Greenland was presented as a dead serious strategic move. The goal was to get what they call de facto control, which basically means having the final say on all security stuff in the region. It's all about protecting U.S. and Western interests.
Okay, so you can probably guess how this went over. How did Europe react? Well, the broadcast doesn't frame it as a legitimate disagreement. Instead, it's painted as a totally predictable and, frankly, emotional outburst, what they literally call a pointless tantrum.
And wow, this quote really lays it out there, doesn't it? A European leader just comes right out and calls it blackmail and a new low. You don't really need to read between the lines on that one.
But the broadcast has a comeback for that. It basically says all that outrage was just a performance, a show of defiance, as they put it, from European elites who were just mad about being asked to pony up more cash for their own defense.
Okay, but here's the twist. According to this source, the Greenland offer was never really about buying Greenland. Nope, it was a smokescreen for something much, much bigger, a geopolitical strategy focused on the Arctic.
So think of the Arctic like a giant chessboard. You got 8 countries with a stake in the region, 7 of them, all NATO members. And then you have the one outlier, Russia. And that, according to the source, is the key to understanding the entire Greenland play.
And the broadcast lays out exactly why this was so urgent. They point to a few big threats. Russia's military presence is growing up there, China is getting more and more active in the region, and there's the very real potential for hostile powers to use Greenland's location to launch missiles.
So where does this all lead? Was it a huge diplomatic mess? Not according to the source. They frame this as a total masterclass in negotiation, a high-stakes bet that paid off big time for the U.S.
And here it is, what the source basically calls the Trump negotiation playbook. It's a pretty wild take on diplomacy. Step 1, pleading gets you 0. Just forget about asking nicely. Step 2, you gotta use your leverage. Make a bold offer, something like buying Greenland. Step 3, float a threat. Hint at something like a tariff hike if things don't go your way. Step 4, just wait. Let the outrage happen, let them huff and puff. And then, step 5, once all that dies down, they'll come to the table and you get your deal.
And in the end, the source claims total victory. They quote the president saying a deal was already coming together that gave the U.S. everything it wanted on the security front. So in their view, that tough, hardball approach, it worked like a charm.
And really, this all boils down to one core idea. This America First strategy isn't about going it alone. It's about tough love. The argument is that by forcing its allies to step up and pull their own weight, a stronger America actually makes the entire Western alliance stronger. It's a controversial take, for sure, but that's the argument.
So that's the breakdown of this argument for a much more assertive, more transactional kind of foreign policy. It's a really different way of looking at things, and it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. Is this the new playbook for American diplomacy? Or was it just a temporary phase in the long story of international cooperation?